give the call to the honourable member and the Assistant Minister for Social Services and Prevention of Family Services, a member for Richmond, the Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I too rise to speak on the Treasury Laws Amendment Cost of Living Tax Cuts Bill 2024. And I am very pleased to be speaking on this very important bill. It is very important because this bill means that all 13.6 million Australian taxpayers will receive a tax cut from July 1 this year. And of course, this is on top of the Albanese Labor government's cost of living relief, which is already being delivered right across the country in terms of cheaper medicines, more bulk billing, cheaper childcare, fee-free TAFE, building more social and affordable homes, and increasing rent assistance. So these combined with the tax cuts are vitally important. Now, of course, these tax cuts mean, for example, in my electorate on the New South Wales North Coast, that every taxpayer there will receive a tax cut this year. And in fact, 71,000 taxpayers in Richmond will receive that tax cut, with the average being $1,384 in terms of their tax cut. But we'll just put it in a bit of perspective in terms of what our tax cuts are delivering compared to what we had seen previously with the Liberals and Nationals, because under our plan, under these new tax cuts, 61,000 residents in my electorate are receiving a bigger tax cut than they would have otherwise under the Liberals and Nationals. That is a huge amount for my electorate and the difference that it will make to people. And certainly it's been a very positive response from my community in terms of the fact that Labor is delivering these tax cuts for so many people across the community. Now, our tax cuts are very good for Middle Australia, working families. They're good for women, they're good for helping with cost of living pressures, good for labour supply and good for the economy. And the tax cuts will make a real difference for those 13.6 million taxpayers who will be receiving that tax cut, 2.9 million more than would have benefited under the previous government's plans. It means 11.5 million taxpayers will receive a bigger tax cut, and it means that 5.8 million women will now receive a bigger tax cut. And, Deputy Speaker, people such as nurses, teachers and police are some of the most likely to benefit, with more than 95% of those taxpayers getting a bigger tax cut. And I do want to discuss this in the context of Labor's strong support for workers and improving working conditions right across the board, whether it's job security or working conditions. It is only Labor that consistently delivers this support. And particularly in terms of our right to disconnect laws, they're very vitally important for workers across the country, and especially true for our police and emergency service personnel. And, Deputy Speaker, as you know, I'm a former frontline police officer, and I know how important it is for police to have really good working conditions in place, especially that right to disconnect. But of course, what are we seeing? We're seeing the opposition leader opposing it, and claiming that he will in fact repeal it. So we finally do see an election policy from the Liberals and Nationals, and what do we see? They're going to repeal all these laws that create better working conditions for Australians, including the right to disconnect. And that's really appalling when it comes to police officers. And I can tell you as a former police officer how important it is to have these working conditions in place, to make sure that police have that work-life balance there. And our police do an amazing job under often very difficult circumstances, and it's Labor who backs them. And it really shows the opposition leader is so out of touch that he wants to repeal these laws. It is quite disturbing and appalling. And of course, we saw yesterday the Police Federation of Australia coming out and condemning the opposition for their stance. In fact, they've said that the opposition's measures are disrespectful and wrong. Well, I stand with the Police Federation of Australia, and I stand with all of the police officers, and indeed many of the former police colleagues I've spoken to also condemn the opposition leader for really wanting to take away important workplace rules. And as I said, our police work very hard, and whether it's when Labor delivers for them, whether it's their working conditions or their tax cuts. For example, a police officer on $110,000 a year is now going to get a tax cut of $2,400 under Labor. And as I've said, we certainly stand with our police forces, but the opposition leader doesn't. He is certainly out of touch. And, Deputy Speaker, in terms of tax cuts, parents, particularly one with young children, will be meaningfully supported to return to work under the government's tax cuts changes through increases to their take-home pay. And now, Deputy Speaker, I just want to speak about what a positive impact this particularly has for women. And I'm very proud to represent a government that is absolutely committed to gender equality. And first and foremost, let me emphasise our government's resolute dedication to make and take real action on gender equality. And we understand that achieving true equality requires more than just words. It demands concrete steps to achieve that real change. And, Deputy Speaker, our commitment to gender equality is directly reflected in these tax cuts, because every single tax-paying woman in this country will receive a tax cut. And now, thanks to this government, 90% of tax-paying women will receive an even bigger tax cut. And that certainly will make a huge difference. These targeted measures are really essential in narrowing the gender pay gap and promoting economic equality. And as I said, Labor's new tax plan is part of a suite of cost-of-living relief for women provided by Labor. Over our past 2 budgets, we've seen and made significant investments to support women across various sectors, right across the board, through investment in childcare, paid parental leave, women's safety, family law, workplace safety, women's health and fair wages. We have placed women at the centre of our economic agenda, whether it be we see initially from the Jobs and Skills Summit, the Employment White Paper, and of course recommendations from our Women's Economic Equality Task Force, along with analysis contained in the White Paper, are integral to developing our national strategy to achieve gender equality. And by investing in women's education, training and entrepreneurship, we're not only fostering economic growth, but we are creating a much more equitable society for all. And as a government, we are committed to leading the charge and change and creating that future where every individual, everyone regardless of gender, has the opportunity to fulfil their potential. And it is through this commitment and real change we can do that. And as I said, these tax cuts, they have such widespread benefit. Under the proposed changes, taxpayers earning less than $45,000 will now receive a tax cut. And this will significantly boost the take-home pay of Australians on modest incomes and people working part-time. And someone on the average wage in Australia, which is around $73,000, will now get a tax cut of more than $1,500 a year, more than double what they would have gotten under the Liberals and Nationals. And can I say this is particularly important for those living in regional and rural Australia. As we know, those of us living there, we know that these communities are ones where they will earn less than people in the city. So it actually makes a huge difference percentage-wise when you were looking at that in terms of people living in regions like mine in regional Australia and indeed right throughout regional and rural Australia. And that is something that Labor is always very cognizant of as well, making sure we are delivering for the people in country Australia. We know how important that absolutely is. So, as I say, these tax cuts will make a huge difference. And of course, our changes also deliver a better, more progressive tax system. By dropping 2 tax rates and lifting 2 thresholds, we are giving everyone a tax cut, providing a significant amount of help right across the board. And the reason, Deputy Speaker, the Albanese Labor government is introducing these changes because we recognise the economic realities of 2024. Australians are under real pressure right now and deserve a tax plan that responds to the challenges they are facing every day. And indeed, when the Coalition initially legislated these stage 3 tax cuts 5 years ago, I'm sure we all agree the world was a very, very different place. That was before the pandemic, before persistent inflation, before higher interest rates, global conflicts and global uncertainty. And with all of those instances happening, with all of that, that put Australians under so much more sustained cost of living pressures. And we know that talking to people, the cost of living pressures that they are under. And when the circumstances change, absolutely changing policy is a responsible thing to do to provide that support to people. And cutting taxes is one measure that can help provide that cost of living relief. And we are getting wages moving again, bringing inflation under control, driving fairer prices for Australian consumers, and really importantly, providing that cost of living relief that I talked about, the energy bill relief, cheaper medicines, more income supports, and the biggest boost to rental assistance in 30 years. And that was a more than $20 billion package for those cost of living measures that we did introduce. And we're doing this, we're providing this cost of living relief in a responsible way that doesn't add to inflationary pressures, while laying the foundations for a stronger and more resilient economy. So, Deputy Speaker, this bill is all about delivering a tax cut for every taxpayer and more tax relief for people to help with those cost of living pressures. Now, we've heard a whole measure of negativity from all the opposition speakers on this. They don't like our changes. They'd prefer wages to be lower, in fact. And we know that Liberals and Nationals, they want Australians to work for more for less money. Well, we don't. We want to assist them. We want to give them tax cuts. We want to make sure they've got cost of living relief, because in comparison to the Liberals and Nationals, Labor is absolutely committed to providing support for Australians through tax cuts and cost of living relief. And in conclusion, Deputy Speaker, can I say, as I said at the beginning, I'm very proud to be speaking on this bill because it will deliver a real impact and real assistance in terms of tax cuts for people right across the country, and as I've said, particularly too for those people in regional and rural Australia, and the major impact that it has and the benefits that it has for women in our society. And Deputy Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.
Order. I thank